today we're doing Drawing with the Halfling. If you're new here, welcome to our Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and sometimes about D&D. So let's get started. So today I wanted to talk and gush and rave about Beren and Luthien while we do a little illustration. So if you're ready, let's get going. So I wanted to just go ahead and jump right into it because I've got a lot of thoughts and I've got the book in front of me because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. But starting off, I just want to mention that this story was written in 1917, or like the first draft was written in 1917, and you can definitely tell that the audience for this story is very different from everything that we've read thus far in the Silmarillion. And what I mean by that is that everything else reads very much like a textbook, like a history book, but this reads as an epic fairy tale in the same way that The Hobbit reads as this epic adventure. And you can tell that that story was written for his children. You can tell that Beren and Luthien was written for his wife. There's just no denying that. And there are so many different fairy tale motifs, tropes, whatever you want to call it, just sprinkled throughout this book. And I just want to talk about all of them. So starting off, we have the sort of a recap of what's going on with Barahir. We have the fooling and the entrapment of Gorlim, who is captured by Sauron and then is tricked into revealing the location of Barahir. And then we have Beren, who of course is the hero of the story. And Beren is off on his own, doing sort of a separate mission or separate task. And in doing this, he has a dream or vision of carrion birds just lying thick on a branch of a tree with blood pouring from their beaks. And then he sees the phantom of Gorlim, who tells him, that he needs to go and save his father. And in reading that is such a huge folklore fantasy trope. And when I'm talking about fairy tales and folklores in this, I'm talking specifically about Scandinavian tales, because that's what I'm most familiar with. I grew up heavily reading the Grimm's Brothers fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, and then as of recently I've really gotten into Hungarian folk tales, which, if you don't know, it's a bunch of short stories that you can find on YouTube. They're about, between 5 to 10 minutes long. And all of them are really common fairy tales that we've all heard in different forms, whatever. And a lot of them are Grimm's Brothers fairy tales. And so when I'm talking about fairy tales and folklore, that's specifically what I'm talking about. It's more of the Scandinavian tales. And this is something that you see it in a lot of them, of the hero being given some sort of vision or some sort of spiritual guidance to kind of get them started on their quest. And that's obviously what's happening here. And the use of animals in fairy tales is so prevalent. Like, you cannot find a fairy tale where an animal is not involved in either getting the tale started or as I don't want to call it a plot device, but it kind of is. Like, they're the thing that aids the hero to complete their quest. And that is exactly what happens throughout this story. And what's interesting too is that in all of these different fairy tales, folklore, the hero in some way aids, rescues something, an animal, and then that animal is then a companion or will give the hero some sort of item so that they can call them back when in need. And I mention that because Beren, it says that when he's wandering, he's alone and he befriends the birds and the animals and they come to his aid. And this is something that's never referenced again throughout the rest of the story outside of Hound. But that's he's kind of separate in what's happening here, because we're specifically talking about birds and animals in the woods and in the forest that are aiding Beren, and therefore Beren doesn't hurt them. Like, doesn't, he basically becomes like a vegetarian, I guess. And so I thought that was interesting that Tolkien chose to include this very common motif of fairy tales, but then doesn't reference it again later. And so continuing on, we have him, of course, seeing Luthien and becoming entirely enchanted and just lost in her beauty, which is another common fairy tale thing, that every single fairy tale, the damsel in distress, the maiden of the hero, is always the fairest in the land. She is the creature that all men come from far off places to see the beauty of her. And Luthien is no different. She is the most beautiful thing around, the most beautiful thing alive. And it makes sense. She is the one and only half elf, half Maiar creature. So yes, she is not only beautiful in the sense that she already obtains the beautiful nature that elves have, but then on top of that, she has this angelic appearance because of who her mother is, because she's half Maiar. And so of course she's just the most beautiful thing around. And also something that doesn't seem to be talked about too often in the previous chapters, but is definitely prevalent in this chapter, is magic. That we have Luthien, who, and maybe it's not so much magic, maybe it's more of this just divine nature in her, but she almost sounds like a goddess of spring. It says often that spring lingers with Luthien, that because of her singing, the water melts and flowers begin to bloom. And later we see that Beren wakes up and sees Luthien, and birds are singing and flowers are blooming. Like, she just has this essence of spring always about her. And the actual physical use of magic is used a lot in this chapter, to the point where when I first started reading it, I was like, wait a minute, we haven't really talked about magic at all up to this point. I mean, we know that certain items might have a magical quality to them, such as the Silmarils, but it's so separate from the reader. It's not we know that the Silmarils are divine in nature. We know that they have some sort of, I guess, magical quality to them, but it's not like we see the gems doing anything particularly magical. And so there's a lot of things like that where it's like, yes, these things are divine, and I suppose in that sense are magical, but we're not actually seeing magic sort of coming into play. But in this chapter, it very much so comes into play. We've got spells and enchantments and all sorts of divinations and things that are happening in this chapter. So the fact that magic is much more prevalent was a huge key when I first started reading this, that we are reading a fairy tale. And so continuing on, we have Luthien, who eventually sticks around long enough to fall in love with Beren, and we have fate intertwining the two, which is another common theme in the story, is the idea that fate is really driving the forces of this tale, and that because of that, really the actions of people only play a small part, because fate has already decided where the story is going to end, and that's how it's going to play out. And so we have continuing on, we have Beren and Luthien sort of being revealed. Their love has been kept secret this whole time, and now we have the rejected lover off in the corner who spies them and goes and tattles to Thingol. And when I read that, I immediately thought of the poem The Highwayman by Alfred Noise, which if you haven't read, go read. It's a great poem. But it's the same idea. We have the highwayman in love with the innkeeper's daughter, and we have the stable boy in love with the innkeeper's daughter. And he basically goes and tells the British soldiers about the highwayman so they can get him out of the way, so that the stable boy is free to have the innkeeper's daughter. Which it doesn't actually play out that way, of course, but when I read this, that was the first thing that came to mind was, we have our rejected lover who's going to tattle to in the hopes of, obtaining this fair maiden for himself, and it's not going to work out, and it doesn't. And so Thingol finds out, and as always, Thingol is angry. There's not a single time where Thingol is mentioned in any of these stories where he's not angry. He's always angry, and this is no different. And here we have Thingol really beginning our quest of telling Luthien, no, I'm not going to kill Beren, but then turning right around, and while holding to that promise, he obviously sends Beren on a quest that will surely kill him in the end anyways. And this instantly made me think of the Brother Grimm's fairy tale, the Three Golden Hairs, the Devil's Three Golden Hairs. And in that tale is the same concept. The king doesn't want this guy to be with his daughter, and so he sends him off on the quest to get 3 golden hairs off of the devil, which obviously any normal person would say, oh, he's going to die on this quest. But the thing that is interesting, and kind of the thing that I was anticipating in reading this story, which it kind of came full circle, but not really. But in the tale, the hero again befriends animals and people, and through their aid he's able to complete this quest. Well, one of the people he aids is the ferryman. So the ferryman is entrapped on the ferry. He's only able to take people back and forth, and he's never able to get off. And the hero says, well, if you help me to get across, complete my quest, the next person that comes to you will be there to take your place. And of course, the hero tricks the king into getting on the ferry, and now he's stuck on the ferry out of his own greed to get what he thought would be treasure. In reality, the hero retrieved all this treasure because he aided everyone in his path. And so in reading the story, I was waiting to see if Thingol would be ruined by his own greed. And in a sense, I guess you could say that he was somewhat punished. I don't really know if he had much of a choice in the matter, though. But I mean, he does lose his daughter. The thing that he's trying to prevent comes to pass anyways. Whether that's through Thingol's decision, I don't really know. Again, fate seems to be taking such a heavy toll on this story that it may not have mattered whether Thingol was supportive or not supportive of the relationship. Luthien would have still ended up mortal and with Beren, and still would have been taken from Thingol in that way. But that was the first story that came to mind when I read this. And so, continuing on, we obviously have the quest for the Silmarils, and in this brings about the doom of Mondos and the doom of the Silmarils on King Thingol and on Menegroth and all of their people. In Melion, it's just like, you think you're clever, but you're not. You've doomed us all. And here, having Luthien has the appearance of angelic creature and is half angelic, but we have the actual angelic being herself really taking a backseat on this whole story, which she kind of does anyways in most of our encounters with her. But here, way more so, she takes a backseat and really allows fate to just take its course. And so, jumping forward a little bit, because I don't want to keep y'all here too long, some of the other, I guess I'll just kind of highlight some of the other things that I noticed. But we have the ring of Barahir is another common folklore theme of having some sort of jewelry or item that aids the hero, and or is an item that calls aid to the hero. So like you might have a story where the hero saves a fox and the fox gives him a pan flute and says, if you ever need help, play your pan flute and I'll appear. And that's what's happening with the ring of Bada here, is Beren is obviously in need of help, so he holds out the ring, and through this is able to get aid from Felagond. It's not exactly the same, but you see where Tolkien is taking old stories, old ideas, and revamping them to tell new tales. So we have that one. Some of the bigger ones, which I didn't even try to hide, but is a Rapunzel. You clearly have the image of Rapunzel with Thingol wanting to protect Luthien from going after Beren. And so he builds a tree house that can only be accessed through a ladder, and then takes the ladder away once she's in it. And then she puts an enchantment on her hair to make it grow exceedingly long, and then ties it, which that is directly, maybe not directly a Rapunzel story, but definitely it's like, I see where you got your idea from there. And then we have again this direct use of magic where she enchants this cloak, ties the end of her hair with it so that when it touches the guards, they fall asleep. Which this is an enchanted item that comes in handy for her so often. It saves her butt so often, which is great. And then next, something that I was like, in reading this, I was like, hold on, have we talked about this before? And we haven't. Is Hound, who is just the best of good boys. Like, I love Hound so much. But you would think that a god dog would be mentioned again. Or, mentioned previously that, in the crossing over to Middle Earth, that like, hey, they have a dog that was a gift from a Rome. Like, that might come in handy at points. Which again is why in reading this, I was like, okay, this is a different audience. He wrote this at a different time, and he had a very distinct purpose and idea in writing this story. This is very much a fairy tale, and the interjection of Hound being this powerful, magical, godlike creature. And I mean, not to say that Hound is a god or anything. He's not. He was a gift from Rome to Celagorm, but he is like, his strength and ability is so renowned that in hearing that Hound is on the attack, or on the prowl, I guess, Morgoth creates a beast of his own specifically to fight off Hound. And so I was just like, why have we not heard about this dog before? And so we have Hound, who of course is the animal, the familiar to the heroes and to the hero and heroine of the story, to help them succeed in their quest. And that's exactly what Hound does. And so again, we have this tweaking of fairy tales to tell a new tale. The next thing that just like, we had mentioned it before, but I don't know, it just didn't really like dawn on me too much until I read this chapter, is we have werewolves that really feel like they just came out of left field, right? We have Sauron, who is the master of werewolves, which is not something we see ever again, as far as I'm aware. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read all the Silmarillion, so maybe they'll come back into play again. But it just felt like it was out of left field, especially the vampire thing. Him turning into a vampire after just crumbling under Hound and needing, this angel to relieve him. Him turning into a vampire came out of left field. And then we have Thuring Wethel, who is also this like great vampire female, who is like, when I read that, I was like, wait a minute, have we read about her before? And we haven't. We have not read about her before. Now, that is not to say that in the Lay of Luthien, she is not mentioned in that. I'm not really sure. I haven't read that yet. We will eventually read that and break that down as well. But as far as like reading in the Silmarillion, she came out of left field and she's already dead. And I was like, wait a minute, what's happened here? So definitely need to read the Lay of Luthien to get more of a full story here. But the werewolves came out of left field, and I absolutely love how Draugluin was able to get away from Hound long enough to get to Sauron and just say Hound is there. Like, what an epic thing. Like, Hound is renowned, and just knowing that he's here forces Sauron's hand to be the one to go and fight Hound, and obviously is unsuccessful in that endeavor, and Luthien has to put him in his place, which I love that Luthien is not the damsel in distress in the story, even though we have her being essentially captured or entrapped by her father, and then but she's on her own, escapes that. And then you have her being entrapped by Celegorm and Curufin. And here we have the aid of our trusty animal familiar who comes to her and gets her out of that situation. But not because it seems like she's in distress or anything, but because Hound just sees the injustice in that situation. And then we have her being the one to, Hound defeats the werewolves and Sauron, but Luthien is the one who really cleans the place, puts some holy water on that evil tower, and is the one to sing her angelic song and free all of those that are within it. Like, she is not a damsel in distress. She is our hero's saving grace, as well as Hound. And then we have Beren, who is just distraught, really regretting being in this situation, but then Luthien comes and sort of pulls him out of that darkness, and they're able to go and bury Felagund and continue on. And so then we have this like blissful time with Beren and Luthien for a moment, but then being seen by Celegorm and Curufin, and we have this epic feat of Beren leaping out of Celegorm's horse and jumping onto Curufin and rescuing Luthien. And then we have Hound, who had gone back to his master, but now is realizing that his master is not a good person, and so and actually staying with the hero at this point and saving the hero. We have Beren, being struck by an arrow, and the faithful animal familiar coming to his aid, as well as this angelic creature saving Beren. And I think I laughed at it because it just felt so corny, but saying that Beren's wound was healed by not only Luthien's magical ability and by the herb from Hound, but also from her love. Like, that just felt so corny to read and say out loud. Like, it was her love that saved him, that healed his wound, which also is not uncommon. You can look at the story of Rapunzel and in the original story and see that the prince who's been blinded by the wicked witch is healed because when he finally finds Rapunzel, her love and tears are the thing that heal his eyes. So, I mean, again, we have this common image of love being, this saving, being the most powerful magic, being the most powerful saving thing for our hero. And so, going on, we have Beren believing that he needs to go and do this on his own. And Hound, who is a creature who can talk, but for whatever reason, the only reason I can think of is that this is a fairy tale, can only speak 3 times. And so when Beren leaves and Luthien and Hound, or Luthien, because Hound already knows, but when Luthien realizes that Beren's gone, Hound takes her to Beren, and in that moment is choosing how to counsel Beren. And so he's already spoken to Luthien and not really counseled her, but just said, hey, this is what we're going to do to get you out of here. And then with Beren is specifically giving him counsel on what to do. Again, it's just another very fairy tale-esque thing. And we have the two choosing to, stay together and complete this quest. And again, we have another image of like direct magic and Hound even having his own innate magical abilities, because it says that Hound and Luthien together are able to disguise themselves as Dragluin and Thuringwethil. And then later, when Beren decides he's going to go with Luthien, and Hound says, okay, I can't go any further with you. Again, we have Hound and Luthien disguising Beren. And in reading this, it's like, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but it doesn't sound like they're just using like a disguise kit or something, like just putting the clothes on him. I mean, he is described as running off, howling like a beast, and Luthien flying off like a vampire. So I mean, there's direct magic being used here to disguise our 2 heroes to complete the quest. And that Hound also has this innate magical ability. So something else I found interesting. And then we get Karkaroth, who I just found amusing that Morgoth was like, I am, whether he can't or just won't fight Hound. I just think it's interesting that he chooses to make a creature of his own to specifically go against Hound. And I think that's funny. But here we get one of my most favorite scenes of this whole tale, is when we have Luthien, again, not our damsel in distress, but one of the heroes of the story, who boldly and bravely stands before Morgoth. He's the one who has discarded her disguise, and she stands there stoically looking the devil in his eyes, and openly reveals who she is, which you cannot tell me that Morgoth did not know her name, didn't know who she was by her name. I mean, she is the daughter of a Maiar. That is news worth writing home about. And so the fact that she would have known this for sure, and boldly stands in front of Morgoth and then says that I want to be your minstrel, that she wants to sing for him, like, lady. This is bold and wild, and I love it. Absolutely, I love this scene, and I love this image of Morgoth. Sort of being enchanted by her beauty, and then also thinking that he is just, having this pride about him, that he thinks he is just so fantastic that he has the daughter of Melian and Thingol right in his presence. She is here. The things that he could do, the conniving rumors and lies that he could tell all, the, just the crazy stuff that he could do. So he's just like so giddy with himself. And we have Luthien, who is just keeping calm and just holding her own, while we have Beren, the hero, actually in hiding, which I don't want to make that sound like, he's being cowardly or anything. I think he's being stealthy and being wise in his actions. But I just love the, this image of the traditional hero being in hiding while what would normally be the damsel in distress standing boldly. And so I love that picture, and I love this image of Morgoth essentially like towering over her while she sings this beautiful and enchanting song that causes basically all evil in the room to fall into a slumber, and Morgoth to not be able to hold the Silmarils on his head anymore because her angelic divine song is causing the Silmarils to radiate light and grow heavier and heavier on his head and shoulders. And I absolutely love that. And then, she uses her cloak once again to finally put Morgoth to sleep. And we have Beren coming and getting the Silmaril from the Iron Crown and doing what I think anybody would, naturally want to do. Like, you don't want Morgoth to have the Silmarils. I'm here, let me just take all the Silmarils. And of course the curse of them, won't allow him to. And they're just like, yeah, we're good. We're not going to push this any further because everybody's stirring. And so they run off. And now they run off as their true forms, undisguised, completely themselves, and totally, I don't know if maybe they thought that Karkaroth would still have been asleep. I'm not really sure. I imagine that Luthien has never been in a position to have to use magic quite this often and in this manner, and so maybe she didn't know how long her little sleeping spell would last. I don't know. But Karkaroth is awake and ready to go. And then the scene that I've actually drawn and illustrated here is Beren holding up the Silmaril bravely while Luthien is, exhausted and tired and frightened and just wants to get out of here. And Beren is bravely holding the Silmaril to Karkaroth, and Karkaroth, bites off the hand. And like, when I read that, I literally just like yelled out, "Oh my goodness, what just happened?" So like, that was a twist. That was not out of left field, but definitely not what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting for this dog to be like, "Oh, I don't care, I'm gonna take it anyways." Like, that is very much a dog-like behavior. Like, you shouldn't have this, but they're gonna take it anyways. And it's it's Karkaroth's downfall, which is something that we see Tolkien do quite often, is that evil's undoing is its own evil. And that's what we see here, is that Karkaroth's downfall is being so evil that the Silmarils, being holy, cannot be within him, cannot be touched by him. And so he's being burned from the inside out. And so we have the madness of Karkaroth. And we have Beren, on death's door, because he's not only lost a hand, he's he has venom now in his bloodstream. And something interesting that I guess I just now realized is sort of the parallel of Beren and his father, in the sense that they've both now lost hands. He is now Beren the One-Handed, who tries to call himself the Empty-Handed, but everybody just ignores that name. Like, whatever, Beren, you're one-handed, okay? And we have the eagles swooping down to do what the eagles generally do in our stories, is come down and get our heroes out of danger and put them in a place of safety, and then saying, "Peace out, that's all we gotta do." We've got more important things to do now. And so that, obviously that's what happens. Beren and Luthien are laid down in Doriath. Hound is there and is once again the hero's companion, and with Luthien's aid, they're able to heal Beren's wound and are able to take him to Thingol. We have Thingol once again being angry and perturbed that Beren is still alive, but, you know, coming to his senses and seeing the love that Beren and Luthien have for one another. And then hearing, you know, their epic tale. And Beren realizing, like, technically he has fulfilled his oath. His hand does have the Silmaril. It's just technically not with him. But they need to actually finish this off because, you know, trouble has kind of followed them. And they need to go take care of Karkaroth. And we have them going off to do that. But Hound is, you know, such a good boy, is the one to actually take out Karkaroth and kill Karkaroth at the price of his own life. And the image of Hound taking his last moments to go to Beren's side and fall by his side and using his last, you know, chance to speak, to say his farewell to Beren, just like, I was in tears. It was so sad. And just a very, I don't know, like this whole story is just a very beautiful, solemn story, and this was one of those points. And so we have Mablung putting the Silmaril in Beren's hand in fear of what the Silmaril would do to Mablung, like, which I find interesting because it doesn't hurt Beren's hand, of course, but Mablung is just like, I don't trust my own good nature to, you know, trust that the Silmaril won't hurt me. And so he quickly gives it over to Beren, and Beren is now able to entirely finish the quest of the Silmaril. But he himself dies as well, but not before seeing Luthien. And then we have this beautiful image of Beren forcing himself to wait in the halls of Mondos, and then Luthien basically coming in and pleading for the two to have a life together. And that's essentially what happens. And again, we have another common theme of this angelic nature, this spiritual nature being the thing that sort of ties the story together, that allows the hero and heroine, or the hero and, you know, the maiden, to be together and have this, you know, beautiful fairy tale. And that's what happens. You know, Luthien pleads their case and chooses to have one life with Beren rather than to live an immortal life without him. And it wasn't like she was given the option to just continue to be immortal, but she was given the option to essentially be in heaven. Like, I mean, the equivalent to heaven for elves, and to live there without, you know, grief and sorrow. But that's not what she wanted. She wanted to be with Beren. She wanted to live, even if it was just one life and one, you know, short life. She would rather live that short life with him than to live thousands of years without him. And I just think that's beautiful. And I think it also shows how much Tolkien loved his wife, and I imagine how much she loved him, because we don't have Beren choosing to be with Luthien. We have Beren waiting to say a final goodbye to Luthien. We have Luthien being the one to choose Beren, to choose to sacrifice something to be with Beren. And so I think that shows how highly Tolkien saw his wife, and, you know, the beautiful love that they had for one another. So yeah, I just really want to talk about this. I know this is a long video, but I had so many thoughts and opinions, and I do have a confession to make. This was my first time reading this story. I have really made a strong effort to not spoil this story for myself. I knew I wanted to read the Silmarillion. I knew I wanted to read this story, and so I've made it a point to not watch anybody else's Beren and Luthien videos, because I wanted to read the story for myself. And so that's what you guys got. You guys, I mean, literally when I've filmed, I had just finished reading and taking my notes over the chapter, which I read the chapters about 2 to 3 times before I film. And so technically by the time I filmed, I had read it 3 times, but it was, I mean, you're getting a pretty raw reaction of me telling you the story because I was very excited about this. And I'm glad I waited to read Beren and Luthien and have the context behind it and kind of get a raw telling of this beautiful tale. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know this was a long video, but still, I'm if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to me rant and rave over this video. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little illustration. I'll probably do another one of Beren and Luthien at some point, but for now, I did this one, which is the reference is my husband and me. So yeah, there you go. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks. Well, there you guys have it. We did our little illustration of a scene from Beren and Luthien while I just gushed and raved about this chapter. And I hope you guys enjoyed it because I know I certainly did. But I really hope that you guys have a wonderful, blessed week and may your homes be filled with food and cheer. Bye.